here with Nancy Harrow, who has been, as we say, a shero of mine for a long time in her various guises. And Nancy finally consented to be under the pitiless scrutiny of a video camera, and we're going to see how this goes. I wanted to ask you about the new CD that you're planning.
Oh, it's only a little bit planned so far, and I don't know whether I should keep doing what I'm doing. I was thinking of calling it "Sing Me a Sad Song," and that because I keep thinking of when I'm choosing the songs that they're all sad. So I'm not sure whether I should do that or not.
How do you feel when you sing a sad song?
I feel the same as when I'm singing a happy song.
Okay.
It's just that I don't know about the listener. When 8 tunes that are all sad, I don't know how that goes over. I'm used to making sets that, it gets varied. And there are different forms of sadness. They're not all the same.
What draws you to pick out a particular song?
It's usually the lyric, but also the melody as well. But I can't sing songs that don't have a good lyric. Even when it has a good melody, there's certain songs that I just can't sing because they have a ridiculous lyric.
Okay. Can you think of any?
Of it, which ones? Yeah, like
the ones you can't sing or
Lullaby of Birdland. I could never sing that.
A lot of those songs that were great melodies to begin with and then have lyrics grafted onto them, the lyrics are, with all apologies, quite dopey.
That's what I think, yeah. And I love the song Americans. I mean, it's not a song I would sing, but usually, but with the deer in the antelope play was, I forgot the title.
Home on the Range.
Home on the Range. I love the. I like the whole thing. I like the lyric and the melody. It's just that it's sort of inappropriate. I've never been on a range, but anyway. But I like the lyric of it.
I don't think you have to be have ever been on a range to have the right to sing that song.
Right? No, I guess not. It was Roosevelt's favorite song.
If you think about all the songs we love from the 30s,
right.
All these songs about foreign places by people who'd never been off Broadway, it's pretty
That's
funny.
true, yeah.
You said one of the songs that you mentioned was a Kurt Weill song.
Oh yeah, right. There were 2 Kurt Weill songs I was thinking of doing. One was It Never Was You, and the other one was September Song. I just did a Kurt Weill song on the last one, right? Well, listen, I'm drawing a blank, but it was. But I just did another Kurt Weill song.
Well, this is the place to insert an advertisement. If you want to know what the Weill song Nancy did on her most recent CD, it's called Second Thoughts. You can buy it now.
But Second Thoughts was not the Kurt Weill song.
Okay, well, discount anything the interviewer says. How did Second Thoughts come to you?
Oh, that was because it was in the middle of my. I wrote that one, and it was something. The lyric came to me as you'd have to describe the whole situation of the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I was like a little bit of a prisoner here, and it was a means of escape. When I wasn't planning to do the whole album, I was only planning to do that one song, because I just wanted to do it. And then we went to the studio, and then we finished it very fast, and we said, let's do another one. We did a couple, and then I had sung once with Ted Rosenthal, but it was sort of an accidental meeting, and this it was great. He sounded so beautiful, so that's when we decided to do a whole album and go back into the studio, a different studio, just the 2 of us, and do the rest of it.
You've done a lot with various pianists, and this is not going where you might think it would go. what is it? What's the interrelationship between a singer and a pianist?
It's so wonderful. Actually, any of the music, the guitarist too. It's not just the pianist. But I've worked with so many great pianists, and it's always been an enormous pleasure, because once you've sung with somebody, you've both been creating something together, and it's like your old friends. And it's when you work with great musicians like I have, it's like playing tennis with a pro that's better than you are at the game, and they're so inspiring. So it's always been a pleasure for me.
So you've been fortunate.
Very. It started because the person who introduced me to jazz altogether. The person I went to see, because I had the feeling that I wanted to do this, was the only musician I knew at the time, and that was Dick Katz. And he sent me to somebody else. He didn't do the demo with me, actually. So it was done with Bob Durrow. But anyway, but the people that he recommended, because he was the one who was telling me who to get, they were all good, great jazz musicians. I almost did a demo with Ahmed Jamal, but because I had gone to John Levy to ask him for help finding a musician, and that would have been great. But I mean, there's so many that I did even just one thing with that were great, like Ray Bryant. That was fabulous.
How did you find these people? I mean, it seems almost inconceivable that you're somebody who is starting a singing career, and you go and you say, did you just go to Dick Katz and say, I need a pianist to make a demo? Or
No, I went to Dick Katz and said, I think I can sing. I wanted to know how I should go about it. And he sent me to some man, now I can't think of his name. But anyway, he wasn't, I guess he was a musician himself, but he wasn't well known, just for his advice. And he said, I shouldn't take any lessons, I should just make a demo. And then I went back to Dick and said what he said. And Dick was not somebody who wanted to ally himself with someone who was a novice. And so he didn't offer to do it from himself. But he said, I know this Texan who will do it with you. And he sent me to Bob Durrow. But then afterwards, Dick is the one who introduced me to John Lewis. And it just, once you know one great musician, they have another one that they'll send you to if they can't do something.
And then you have a calling card. You can say, Dick Katz said, I should say hello to you, or something like that.
Well, in this case, with John, he brought John over to his house, and I sang for John. But that was later,
Okay.
much later. But then John did the same thing. When I was going to Europe. I was going to Paris right after the first album, and he said, "Go see Kenny Clark, and tell him I said you should see him." So I went to hear him. He was at the club there. I can't think of the name of the club, of course, but
it might have been the Blue Note.
yeah, the Blue Note. That's right. And in Paris, yeah. And he invited me to sit in with him, and I sang a song with him. And he walked with me over to the club, the Mars Club, and said to the owner, "Hire this girl." So it's one of those things that, because I was always in touch with the people who knew what to do.
It's nice to know that people had ears. People
Yeah.
still have ears, but it's nice to know.
So that was amazing. I was there for 6 weeks at this Morse Club.
And this is after the first record.
Right after the first record, so it was 1961.
How did you, Hentoff was involved with the first record,
Yes,
was he
right.
not?
I was sitting in with musicians by that time. There was a lesser known musician that was telling me that what I should do, but I became friendly with. And I used to go sit in. He was playing in New Jersey, and I'd drive out there and sit in with his group. And why did I mention this? Bill Trillia. He was well known later.
Yes.
He played with Mingus.
And he's on some wonderful records with the trumpeter Tony Frisella.
Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he's the one who told me. He said I should listen to Lester Young and memorize some of the solos, which I did, and that was very helpful.
What gave you the courage to do all this?
I was still working. When I first started, I was still working in a publishing house. Right after college, I had gone to work in a publishing house. I was the low person in the editorial department. And it was this William Morrow. And Earl Stanley Gardner was there. He supported the house, actually, because he wrote like 4 books a year.
For younger viewers, Earl Stanley Gardner is the creator of the
Perry Mason.
Perry Mason.
Right. And so what happened was, at one point, the editor I was working for said, gave me one of his books to read, and I found all these things in it where they were inconsistent. The gun was in the wrong place and couldn't have gotten there in time for the way he had written it. So I wrote up like a report for it. And after that, they would ask me to read all of them. And I never read mysteries myself, ever. So funny. But anyway, the people who were, since he was the main support of the publishing house for their, he was very important to them. So it was done, it was the editor I was working with was a woman, and they would have conferences with the Thayer Hobson, who was the president of the house. That wasn't called president. What was it called? He wasn't an editor. He was just the person who procured a lot of authors. And so that I was just out of college, and I was a fresh, I was completely ignorant of it when I got there. And we would have these conferences with this editor and the Thayer Hobson, who was the publisher. He was the publisher, actually.
Did 2 prongs. 1, did you get any extra money for doing this? And 2, did Earl Stanley Gardner know you existed?
Yes, then eventually he did, and he told me not to go near the water. Remember that?
What?
You don't go near the water, he wrote me. Because he was getting so it was dependent on the things I was finding. He liked it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So anyway, I was there for 5 years actually. By the end of the last couple of years, I was staying up until 3 a.m. because I was sitting in with musicians. I hadn't recorded yet, but
So
somebody came to. It's so funny because Stanley Gardner was not really a good writer. He was wonderful at thinking up plots, but he didn't write well. It was sort of formulaic, and it was But someone wrote me a letter from England because he was doing a study of Earl Stanley Gardner, and he'd gone down to Texas, where I guess the university there has his all his papers and everything, and so he looked me up because he saw that I had been editing him, because it's mentioned in a book about Gardner. And he came up here to visit me, and I have all these books, you know, that I must have edited 10 of the Gardner books while I was there, and I have copies of all of them. And it was like it was a precious thing he was looking at, you know, the original edition of it and everything. So funny.
That's very sweet. But where did you were doing publishing 9 to 5 and sitting in at night. I still think this is courageous that you said, I want to be a singer. I don't want to just be somebody rising through the ranks at Morrow.
Exactly, yeah. Well, it was the passion. I really loved doing it. And I wasn't writing anything myself yet, not for ages. I didn't think I could, but anyway. But I just loved sitting in, and before I got the first job and before I did the first record. Nat actually heard me sitting in. That's how I got the first record. Yeah.
Okay. And people were always on the lookout for somebody new, somebody who sounded authentic as you do, and sounded distinctive.
You know, I had listened to all these things since I was tiny, because I had 2 older brothers and they had a big jazz collection. It was all swing music that they were listening to, but you know, my favorite record was A Tisket a Tasket when I was 5. So it was a long history of listening to the music. It was in my head.
So when you walked into a room with Buck Clayton and Dickie Wells and Dick Wilson and Kenny Burrell, you knew what to do.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
But walking into that room, I'll never forget it. It was so exciting. But Kenny was actually on that record because of me, because I had sat in with his group at Minton's. And I was with my husband and a friend of ours, and we wanted to see what the club was like. And I may have told you this before, I don't know if I did. And Adolph said to me, why don't you ask them to sit in? And I said, I don't know them. I can't ask somebody I don't know at all. And he said, what have you got to lose? So I said, okay. And I went over and asked Kenny Burrell, could I sing a song here? It was a quartet. And he said, sure. It was amazing. It was so generous of him. It was amazing. And so when I actually got an offer to do a recording, it was mostly old-timers. It wasn't, Kenny was my age, and these people were 10, 15 years older. It was all bassy people.
Yes.
And so I said to Nat, if you're going to do guitars, I really want to have Kenny Burrell do it. He said, sure. He wasn't that famous yet. He was just...
No.
Yeah.
No. As a side note, I want you to write a song called What Have You Got to Lose?
That's good.
I can hear you singing this.
That's a good idea.
What I was thinking of asking you, in case all else failed, was a gambit, I suppose, which is, you are so many things. You do so many things. I'm not going to list them here because let listeners and watchers find out in a moment, but an old girlfriend of mine asked me the question, if I woke you up in the middle of the night and said, who are you? What would you say? And so I'm asking you that.
It's funny because I used the first whole part of my life, I felt like I was an editor who could sing, or a singer who knows something about literature, because I had this experience of the 5 years at the publishing house, and also I had written a thesis because I majored in literature, and and at some point I combined them, which was because I kept thinking it was I wasn't really one or the other anymore. I wasn't really a literary person anymore, and I wasn't a singer. I was an editor who could sing, and so it felt like that. It was like a split personality. But when I put them together, then I knew who I felt good about it when I started to write my own songs and the lyrics. First it was the lyrics, just for someone else's melody. And then it was, I had this experience with meeting a poet who had written a whole book of poems about the blues. And I said, you ought to put these to music. You should, and he said, I don't know any musicians. So I said, I do, I'll ask them. And nobody wanted to do it. So I said, oh, blues melody, I can do that. And so that's what I did. That was the first song I wrote, was to his lyric with my melody. A blues melody. It was really easy.
And is it a straight line from that to theater?
I think so, because it was, let's see, how did that happen? Because the first one, no, it wasn't. The first one was not the Marble Fawn. My thesis at Bennington was Hawthorne's The Marble Fawn. So that was, but that wasn't the first one I did. First one I did was a Willa Cather novel. And I've suddenly thought, because I tried to write songs just out of my head or my own experience, and it was hard to do enough of them like that. But when I decided to do it with the Lost Lady, that by Willa Cather, it was so easy. Just read the book and see where the song should come, and then write a song for that situation with those characters, and then go to the next part, the next thing in the story, and do the same thing until I had a whole set of songs. And then first we were thinking of we made an album like that, but we thought of staging it as well, but we never got a person who could. Anyway, it would have been hard to do because she left a note in her will that she never wanted anybody to ever dramatize anything she had written. So I didn't do The Lost Lady, but I did. The next one I did was a book that I had written that was very meaningful to me as a child. It was a children's story called Maya the Bee, and it was 18. We made it into a puppet show eventually. There were 18 characters in it, so it was easy to do a song for each one of them. And then there's a story as well. So.
You were telling me the story a little bit, that one of the things is that Maya the Bee wants to get home and wants to rescue.
Well, what happens is she's a rebellious little bee, and she goes off on her own and doesn't go back to the hive because it's too noisy, and and she wants to have an adventure. And so that's the story, really. And then she gets captured by the wasps, not the wasps, the hornets. And she meets all these other insects along the way, and each one has a different kind of. It's a wonderful book. It's a German book for children that my mother got for me when I read it when I was 7, I think. And it has a female heroine, so it's very appealing. But the book itself, outsold the Bible in Germany. It's that popular, and it still is. It's amazing story. And anyway, so she gets captured by the hornets, and then when she's imprisoned by the hornets, she overhears their plan to attack her hive, and that's why she's flying home to save the hive.
I told you earlier that what sticks in my head is the poor dung beetle who's masquerading as a higher species of insect, and he gets unmasked, and she's furious at him.
She's a ladybug? No, what is she? Effie is oh my God, I forgot what insect she is. Anyway, but he says he was a rose beetle.
Oh, yes.
But he's actually a dung beetle. And she finds out, and then she wants to break up with him. They were a pair, and then, so there's a song about his being rejected by her, and her angry song to him that he's been posing and has misrepresented himself. But I forgot what she is. Isn't that funny? She's not a ladybug. Isn't that funny?
We can fill this in.
Yeah, right.
Text.
Okay.
But what it sticks in my mind is, and I'm going to get the title slightly wrong. You're not who you say you are.
You're not what you said you are.
Yeah.
You're not well bred. You're so well bred. Let's see. You said you were a rose, and now I find you in the trash. You said nobody knows, but they'll find out in a flash. You're not what you said you are. I don't know how well bred you are. So what are you cut out to be? And that was the lyric.
What a denunciation.
What a what?
What a denunciation.
I know.
Like this.
Yeah, she's very angry.
That sticks in my head. I mean, there are several Nancy Harrows on my CD shelf. There is the romantic, there's the dramatic, there is, although I think of you, and this is me intruding, as a storyteller, first
Right.
and foremost.
That's what I didn't think I was a storyteller, but I love stories, you know. And so that's why it was liberating to try to do the music for the stories.
So,
And then and Roland was so receptive to the idea. He kept saying, I like these characters. and we worked on it together, the music on it together. He was fantastic.
tell us a bit about Roland Hannah. Because you knew him before he was Sir.
Before what?
He was Sir. He became Sir
Oh no,
Roland Hannah.
he was already Sir when I
Oh,
met
he's
him.
already
Yeah,
Sir, okay.
yeah. The first album I did with him was not this children's thing. It was Your Nera album, and I didn't know him, but Ted Ono, the producer, knew him, and thought he would be good, and we just hit it off. It was great. He was the most generous person. Roland was just a great guy, and beautiful pianist. You know, when he was playing, he would play down in the village at that bar. It's right near the cookery, but a block earlier than the cookery. I can't think of what it's called.
The Knickerbocker?
Yeah, the Knickerbocker. That's right. and people, the other musicians would line up behind him to watch his hands. He was endlessly inventive. It was just amazing. And so, but such a generous guy. I remember one time we were doing. It wasn't Maya or the other. Or maybe it was Maya. I can't remember. We went to do something extra at the end of the to add another instrument, to add a tuba. I think it was to one of the songs, and it was a different studio. So not a well-known studio like we had done it in, the bulk of it, but some other studio where you're just adding one thing. And there was a young kid who came up to talk to Roland because he was so delighted to see him. And Roland asked him, what did he play? And he played the drums. And Roland, really young kid, like 18 or something at the time. And Roland said to him, let me have your name, I can always use a drummer. That's what he was like.
It seems to me you've been fortunate in the musicians who work with you, and you inspire these musicians.
Oh, I don't know about that.
That's what it feels like on the recordings.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me more about Dick Katz, because he's not somebody all that well known these days, which is a pity.
Yeah, I know. He was a really good musician. And, but he was so, when I started to write the music, he was so because I did one where he did the arrangements of the music, and he was so critical of everything I was doing, and he's it's just his personality. He is, because I was found out, he kept telling me about another singer who brought him to tears with her singing, and then he would tell me that one of these songs wasn't good because the melodies didn't, something was too long for it. He said it was like limping on one leg, that kind of thing, and then I found out from Bob Brookmeyer. When I told him that Dick is always making me feel so terrible every time I'm working with him, and he said, "That's funny because when I go to see him, he's always telling me about other trombonists who are great." Isn't that funny?
That's the way to make people comfortable.
Right. Anyway, there's something wrong with it in that way, but he is a good pianist. The other thing, he was there, he did Lost Lady with me, didn't he? Yeah, because I remember I said let's get a saxophone player. I said I think I could just hear Phil Woods doing this, because we wanted to have one instrument that was sort of like her in the story, and he said, "Oh, I know somebody who plays like Phil Woods." And I said, "Why don't we just ask Phil Woods?" And he said, "Oh, he's never going to do it." And I had already made an album not an album with him, but he was on the John Lewis album. They won the Atlantic album. So I said, "I'll call him." I don't want to get an imitation of Phil Woods when I could get Phil Woods. So I called him up, and he said, "Sure, that's great. Thanks for asking." And that whole record is so made. The music is just so dominated by Phil Woods.
Well, he had a gorgeous projecting sound.
He did.
You couldn't miss it.
Right, and he was so inventive. He was great.
Tell me more about Bob Brookmeyer.
The first album before I did the one with Nat. I can't remember this. I think so. Chris Albertson wanted to have me do an album of blues. I don't remember where he heard me. Maybe it was after the first album. I can't remember the sequence anymore. And so he said, I didn't know Bob at all, but my friend was going out with him. I think that was the sequence. And I knew he was a good arranger. So I called him up to see if he wanted to do this album, because Chris Albertson said he was going to do this album. And Bob said, so he came over to my house, and the first thing he said was, "Well, where's the money? Who's paying for this?" And I'm such an innocent, I didn't even know. I didn't ask Chris Albertson that. He said, "Well, I'll come talk to you about it after you find out." And so I tried. Then I called Chris Albertson, and I couldn't get him on the phone. I couldn't get him. I couldn't find him again. I mean, I tried to, and then I actually went over to his house, and he didn't want to see me because he didn't have the money, and I guess he was embarrassed that he had asked me to do this, and he didn't have any way of paying for it. And that's the way I first met Bob. It's funny. And so years later, I was at a dinner where I think it was John's birthday party or something like that. I think it was John's 70th birthday party. And I was seated next to Chris Albertson. I hadn't seen him all the time. And he was so embarrassed and apologized to me what happened. And right, it was funny. He was a nice guy, Chris Albertson.
Chris, yes. Yeah. I knew him a little bit.
Yeah.
But you worked with Bob more.
Oh yeah. Then we did. Yeah, he was on the Yonira album, and also the next one we did was he arranged. It was a Street of Dreams, which is doing it with a synthesizer, and it took months to do that album because every time we do a new tune, he would have to decide what sound it was going to be, what was the instrument going to sound like. It was, but it was mostly experimental because of him, but it was good. I think it was good, but it wasn't one that was popular. It was popular with the other musicians. Because it was experimental, you know.
I don't know, I'd like to hear you with a genuine piano in back of you.
I know, it is better. But there's I keep adding those things in because there are a lot of good songs on that album. So I add them to these Partners albums I've been doing. I use that one a lot because people have never heard it.
Do you find yourself drawn to particular composers over others?
I mean, the songs?
Yes.
Oh yeah, a lot. Harold Arlen I like a lot, and Cole Porter too, and Kurt Weill, and I know other. I didn't realize that someone pointed out recently that I've sang a lot of women lyricists. I didn't realize in the beginning. I didn't notice who it was that wrote it or wrote the lyrics until I started to do it myself.
And you don't characterize yourself purely as somebody who is doing the Great American Songbook. I mean, you've done Desperado, you've done the Beatles.
Oh, that's it. The reason for that is there was I was doing the Great American Songbook at first because Billie Holiday was my idol, and I did all of her. I learned all of her songs first, and because when rock came in, and there was no jazz jobs unless you were Ella Fitzgerald, and so I took a job as an editor. I don't know if you knew this, of a magazine, which we named it. It was called the American Journal. It was a complicated story. The publisher was someone who was a psychoanalyst who had a book club of books about psychoanalysis. And he suddenly decided he was going to do the same thing for trade books. And so he offered this job to someone else who didn't want to do it, and she asked me, do I want to do it? And first he wanted me to choose the books and then also do this essay thing where you publish a magazine. And I said I can't do both. Because Anton was 2 years old when this happened, and I didn't want to be away that much. So I said I would do the magazine part, and I did. It was supposed to be a part-time job of 3 hours a day, but my eye was twitching all the time doing this job because it was so demanding. But the idea was to find writers and just tell them they could write an essay about anything they wanted to write about. So this is a long story, but it turns out that one of them was Seymour Krim, one of the writers. I was choosing the writers that I had read, and then they were like they would be on this. I'll show you the magazine later. But I only did 8 issues with him. But anyway, so Seymour Krim after we got to know each other he was writing the essays. He wrote 2 essays for me. I told him that I was a singer, that I had done 3 albums at the time. No, maybe only 2, just the first 2. And he wrote me back this amazing critique of the albums. And when he said to me, what I really should be doing is looking for songs that the great singers have not done. And so I started to look for the material. That's how I found Desperado, and how I found the Dylan songs, and because I was deliberately looking for something outside my own experience of the regular jazz standards. Because I was looking, I took to heart what he said, and I wanted to do something that jazz singers hadn't done.
say as a non-musician, that story makes me uncomfortable because non-musicians telling musicians what they should be doing is very slippery, very thin ice.
Well, it's just the repertoire. He didn't tell me how to sing it.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, we fixed Seymour, it's okay.
It was nice of him. It was great. He wrote me this. I was completely unknown, and he wrote me this long critique, not critique, but just analysis of each of the songs. And he just said he thought I should be doing something that all of the Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan and Billie Holiday hadn't done. So I thought that was good advice. So that's how I happened to do Desperado and two Dylan songs, and I mean I didn't even know them yet. I was looking for them.
I mean, the question of repertoire is a big one. If you're going to be a newish singer and get up and sing My Funny Valentine, the millions of recordings and performances in back of you can be overwhelming.
Wait, say that again, I didn't understand.
In other words, if you are somebody and you pick Desperado, you don't have this long history of other singers in that genre doing it. If you stand up and you sing My Funny Valentine, there are millions of recordings of it and interpretations. So you're competing with this architecture in some way. It's okay. It's not the most profound thing I've ever said. We can edit.
Okay.
That's the nice thing about this. If I say anything really dumb, it can be cut.
That's good. I don't know how to respond to that because I think it didn't change the audience I had. It wasn't all of a sudden that when I sang Desperado, the people 25 years younger than me heard it. It was still the jazz audience hearing it. It's just that not that many people were singing things like that.
But there was still a jazz audience. That's nice to know.
Oh yeah, of course. There was always the same jazz musicians. Oh, I once made an album with some rock musicians. It was because I asked Nat, did he know any rock musicians? And because jazz was like dormant at the time. It was a couple of years like that, and that was terrible. They were so different. It was so different. Maybe they just weren't great. But he recommended them. Elliot somebody, I can't remember his name anymore. But I mean, the whole thing was it was such a strange sensation. They weren't into the music the same way. They came, and all their girlfriends came to the date. And they were just showing off all the time. It was not a good experience.
This is a Nancy Harrow LP I've never heard.
It wasn't an LP, it was just a demo.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I would never have used any of those it wasn't an LP.
I thought you were pulling a rabbit out of your hat
in
front of me.
No, I did it to see if I could do that. And then actually I found a couple of rock musicians in New Jersey. How did I find them? I can't remember. And those were, I did This Door Swings Both Ways with them, and another, but they were black. They were both black, and it was a different feel, and not from the ones that Nat had recommended. And they didn't have their girlfriends there, and it was much better. I mean, there was some rapport with them at least. The other was so weird.
Well, without getting onto even thinner ice, there's a different rhythmic feel.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it was much closer to jazz than the other ones.
Okay, so now I have to look for This Door Swings Both Ways. Okay.
I have it here somewhere.
All right.
I could find it.
Thank you. When we started off the idea of this interview, you said, I can tell you the story about John Lewis and Dick Katz.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I'll tell you the story. it was a concert with that what's it called? John was had an orchestra for a while. Do you remember?
Orchestra USA.
Yeah, Orchestra USA, right. And in this particular concert that was being done with the orchestra and John and the soloists were the pianists, and also Dizzy Gillespie was the soloist. And John's first jobs in New York were with Dizzy Gillespie. So it was like a reunion between John and Dizzy, is part of it. But John and Dick had gone to music school together, and they were close friends. And John invited Dick to come also to be a guest pianist on part of the program. But the point was that when Dizzy came on, John was coming in to take over, and they were having this reunion. So that's what the first part of the program. Dick was the pianist. I can't remember the details of that. But then it came to the time when Dizzy came on, and John came on stage because he was about to replace Dick at the piano. And he went over to Dick and like, okay, I'm here now. And I was in the audience watching it. And Dick went like that. He refused to get up because he wanted to play with Dizzy. And he actually, in front of the audience, a scene took place where there were no words because I guess there might have been microphones on the stage. But I guess it was very clear what was happening, that he was asking him to get up. It's my turn to sit down at the piano. And Dick was going like that. So you could see how angry John was getting. And finally, I think he played one number with Dizzy. Dick did. And then he finally relinquished the piano. And but John was absolutely livid. And so after the next day, I heard from both of them. So John called up and said, I'm never going to let him invite him again to be on the program because this was outrageous that this scene took place in front of the audience. And, and he was just foaming at the mouth about it. And then I hung up the phone with John, and Dick called. And he said, finally I was able to assert myself with John. It was amazing. Both of their personalities were revealed. It was amazing.
And in public.
In public. I don't know how many people in the audience understood, but Jan and I were sitting in the audience and we were looking at each other. Oh my God, he's not going to get up. It was amazing. But the relationship was, they had been students together, and John's career took off in so much more than Dick's did. But they were still, old friends, and I guess Dick resented it. I have no idea the depths of this thing, but it was astonishing to have a scene like that was public. Amazing.
The music you have recorded with John has a special depth. I don't know how I would characterize it, but there's just this vibrating empathy between the two of you. We were very friendly finally, and also I was friendly with his wife. And but I knew him for years because that was my second album. He came to hear me when I was singing in Paris, and he came to hear me and he said, I wanted to record you. Because he had just taken I don't know how it happened, but maybe because of the lapse in jazz at that point. I can't remember what happened, but he had been named an A&R person for Atlantic. So he said, I have this new job being the A&R person, and I want you to record you. And it was my second album. But he came to Paris. He was in Paris, and he came to hear me at the Mars Club when I was there. And that's when he said that. And then, because I'd only met him that one time before. I guess I'd met him a couple of times. Because he had already recommended me he had already told me to go see Kenny Clark. But anyway,
that's what. So, and we became very friendly, and they actually moved from where they had lived before to right down the street. So we and our kids grew up together, and our kids were about the same age. Theirs was a couple of years younger.
And then you have, I'm going to misstate the title, the John Lewis album for Nancy
Oh,
Harrow,
right.
which is extraordinary.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, right. That's funny because I shouldn't be telling that story.
Okay. Well, why don't we take a break for a moment?
So I
and
can
you
tell you
take
the
a
story.
swig of tea.